There's a deep-rooted fascination and fear around the idea that unseen forces are constantly watching, tracking, and influencing our lives. Throughout history, certain animals have been tied to spiritual realms, often seen as extensions of mysterious powers. In many cultures, witches and practitioners of the occult are believed to use these animals not just symbolically, but as actual agents to monitor and trace individuals. This belief isn't just superstition. It reflects an ancient understanding of how symbolism, psychology, and spirituality intertwine. Why animals? Because animals have always been powerful symbols. They move between worlds, embody certain traits, and capture our imagination. In the context of spiritual tracking, they become metaphors, and some say tools for influence. The idea is unsettling because it challenges our sense of privacy and control, but it also invites us to explore how deeply connected we are to the natural and spiritual world. Understanding these animals, the symbolism attached to them, and their perceived roles in occult tracking is not only a way to grasp cultural narratives, but also to reclaim our mental and spiritual autonomy. By recognizing how fear and belief shape our perception, we can reset our minds and challenge the power these symbols hold over us. So let's dive into this fascinating intersection of folklore, psychology, and spirituality, exploring the 5 animals that witches are believed to use to track you, and what that means for your awareness and protection. When we talk about animals being used in spiritual tracking, the first step is to understand the power of symbolism. Throughout human history, animals have occupied a unique place in our collective consciousness. They are more than just creatures of the natural world. They are potent symbols that convey complex meanings, emotions, and ideas. This symbolic power is precisely why certain animals are believed to be employed by witches or occult practitioners to track or influence individuals on a spiritual level. Symbols operate on a deep psychological level. They tap into the unconscious mind, often bypassing rational thought and engaging directly with our fears, hopes, and instincts. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, called these universal symbols, archetypes, images and motifs that appear across cultures and epochs because they resonate with fundamental human experiences. Animals, especially those associated with mystery or danger, frequently become archetypal figures representing hidden knowledge, transformation, or power. When an animal becomes a symbol in a spiritual or occult context, it gains a dual existence. It is both a real creature and a carrier of meaning. For witches or spiritual practitioners who seek to track or influence others, these animals serve as extensions of their intent. The animal's behavior, its presence near a person, or even dreams involving the animal can be interpreted as signs of spiritual surveillance or influence. This is not merely superstition. It reflects a sophisticated symbolic language that connects human psychology with natural phenomena. Philosophically, this intertwining of animals and spirituality also points to a broader human desire to find order and meaning in chaos. The natural world, with all its unpredictability, becomes a mirror for our inner states. When we see a black cat crossing our path or hear an owl hooting at night, these experiences can stir feelings rooted in centuries of cultural storytelling. The mind, hungry for coherence, often assigns meaning to these encounters, especially if we feel vulnerable or exposed. It's important to recognize that the fear or suspicion surrounding these animals is not inherent to the animals themselves, but arises from the symbolic meanings we attach to them. This means that the power of these animals in spiritual tracking is as much about the mind as it is about the external world. The belief that a certain creature is watching or tracking you triggers psychological responses, heightened alertness, anxiety, or a sense of intrusion that can feel very real. Understanding this symbolic framework gives us a measure of control. When we realize that the power these animals hold is mediated by our own perceptions and cultural narratives, we reclaim our mental autonomy. We learn to question whether these symbols have authority over us or whether they simply reflect our own fears projected outward. So when you next notice one of these animals near you, pause and consider, is this a sign of unseen tracking, or a call to examine the stories you tell yourself. Because the true power to reset your mind and guard your spirit lies not in fearing symbols, but in understanding them and in choosing how you respond. In recognizing the symbolic dance between animals and our minds, we gain the clarity to break free from fear and reclaim our inner peace. When we consider the idea that animals can serve as spiritual messengers or trackers, we're entering a domain where the natural and supernatural intersect, a place that challenges our modern rational sensibilities. Yet, this concept is deeply embedded in countless cultures around the world, suggesting that it holds a certain psychological and philosophical truth that merits our attention. From a psychological perspective, animals have a remarkable sensitivity to the environment around them. They pick up on cues, chemical, visual, auditory, that humans often miss. This acute awareness can sometimes be interpreted as a form of tracking, especially when an animal seems to appear consistently in someone's life or vicinity. The mind, always searching for meaning, may see this as more than coincidence. It's here that the boundary between natural behavior and spiritual symbolism begins to blur. Philosophically, animals as spiritual messengers represent an extension of human consciousness into realms that feel intangible. We're dealing with the age-old human quest to understand the unknown, to make sense of experiences that seem beyond explanation. The idea that certain animals can act as intermediaries between worlds gives shape to that quest. It's a way of grounding abstract spiritual concepts in the concrete reality of the animal kingdom. This is not to say that the animals themselves possess supernatural powers in a literal sense. Rather, they function as symbols and signals within a system of spiritual meaning. In occult traditions, witches and other practitioners have long believed that animals can carry intentions, energies, or even curses. The animal becomes a vessel, consciously or unconsciously, through which spiritual forces can operate. This notion aligns with the psychological concept of projection. Human fears, hopes, or desires are projected onto animals, imbuing them with a kind of spiritual agency. Moreover, the use of animals as trackers can be understood through the lens of ritual and belief. When a witch employs an animal symbolically, they're tapping into a shared cultural language of symbols and meanings. The animal is a tool not only for tracking, but for influencing the targeted individual's psyche. This influence can manifest through heightened anxiety, paranoia, or a feeling of being watched, psychological effects that can be as powerful as any external force. It's essential to understand that this mechanism relies heavily on the human mind's interpretive framework. The animals don't act independently as supernatural spies. Instead, they serve as catalysts for mental states that can either imprison or liberate us. Recognizing this dynamic empowers us. It reminds us that our mental and spiritual well-being depends largely on how we process and respond to these symbols. When you start to see animals as part of a broader symbolic system rather than mere carriers of malevolent intent, you open the door to reclaiming your agency. You're no longer a passive subject to unseen forces, but an active participant in your mental and spiritual landscape. In embracing the role of animals as spiritual messengers, not as threats but as symbols, we gain the power to reset our minds, transforming fear into understanding and suspicion into clarity. When we think about black cats, what often comes to mind are centuries of superstition and cultural myths, images of witches' familiars, bad luck omens, or mysterious guardians of the night. But to understand why black cats have been associated with witches, using them as tools for tracking, we need to look beyond the folklore and examine the deeper psychological and symbolic significance these animals hold. Black cats occupy a unique space in human consciousness. Their sleek, dark appearance makes them almost invisible in the shadows, which feeds into the archetype of mystery and the unknown. From a psychological standpoint, humans are naturally attuned to threat and uncertainty. Darkness itself is a symbol of the unknown, of danger lurking just out of sight. The black cat, moving silently through the night, becomes a living embodiment of that fear, both a literal shadow and a symbol of what we cannot fully grasp or control. This is why black cats have often been seen as companions or agents of witches in folklore. They represent a kind of hidden knowledge and power. Witches, traditionally seen as wielders of forbidden knowledge and spiritual insight, are metaphorically linked with creatures that embody stealth, mystery, and otherworldliness. The black cat's association with witches is not just a random superstition. It's a symbolic reflection of how we interpret and project our fears and curiosities onto the animal kingdom. From a philosophical angle, the black cat serves as a liminal figure, a boundary walker between the seen and unseen worlds. Its presence challenges our perceptions of reality and invites us to question what lies beyond the surface. When witches are said to use black cats to track individuals, it's a symbolic way of describing the unseen, subtle ways in which our lives are influenced by forces beyond immediate perception. This can include not just spiritual tracking, but also psychological influence, how fear, suspicion, or the sense of being watched can shape behavior and thought. Psychologically, the fear associated with black cats taps into a broader human tendency to anthropomorphize animals and assign them agency in our inner dramas. The belief that a black cat might be watching or tracking you engages the mind's pattern-seeking function, making you hyper-aware of your environment, amplifying anxiety or alertness. This heightened state can feel very real and oppressive, even if there is no actual external threat. In this way, the black cat becomes a symbol not just of external forces, but of internal mental states: fear, vigilance, and the struggle to maintain control. Understanding this dynamic allows us to reclaim our mental space. The black cat as a symbol is powerful only because we give it power through belief and attention. When we recognize that the tracking attributed to it is often a reflection of our own fears and narratives, we begin to dismantle the hold it has over us. So the next time you see a black cat, remember, it's not a harbinger of doom or a spy of witches, but a mirror reflecting your own mind's capacity for mystery, fear, and ultimately control. Embrace that reflection, and you reclaim your power. Crows and ravens have long held a complex place in human culture, simultaneously revered and feared, admired for their intelligence, yet associated with death and mystery. When we consider their role in the context of witches using animals to track people, we enter a fascinating interplay of symbolism, psychology, and the natural world's deeper meaning. These birds are not just creatures of the sky. They are extraordinary in their cognitive abilities. Studies have shown that crows and ravens possess problem-solving skills and social intelligence rivaling that of primates. This intelligence contributes to their symbolic reputation as watchful sentinels or messengers between worlds. They appear in myths and folklore as intermediaries, bridging the gap between life and death, the physical and spiritual realms. Their black feathers and haunting calls amplify their presence as omens and observers. Philosophically, crows and ravens symbolize transformation and insight. They are creatures of liminality, navigating boundaries with ease. Their ability to observe from above, silently watching, positions them as natural metaphors for surveillance, both literal and spiritual. In the context of occult practices, this translates into the belief that witches use these birds to monitor or track individuals, feeding on the symbolism that these animals carry in the collective psyche. Psychologically, the presence of crows or ravens can trigger deep-seated feelings of unease or vigilance. They serve as reminders of mortality and the unknown, tapping into the primal fear of being watched or judged by forces beyond our control. This psychological impact is crucial to understanding their perceived role in spiritual tracking. The fear and heightened awareness they evoke can alter a person's mental state, making them more susceptible to anxiety or a sense of This dynamic is not unlike what we see in the broader human tendency to assign agency to external phenomena as a way to make sense of internal psychological experiences. When someone feels tracked or watched, it is often their own mind projecting fear onto external symbols. Crows, and ravens with their dark feathers and penetrating eyes become powerful canvases for these projections. Recognizing this interplay between symbol and psyche is liberating. It allows us to step back and examine how much of the power these animals hold over us comes from our own beliefs and fears. When we stop seeing them as agents of external control and begin to understand them as mirrors reflecting our inner state, we gain the ability to reset our minds. In essence, crows and ravens remind us that the boundaries between the material and spiritual worlds are permeable, and that our perceptions shape how we experience these boundaries. By reclaiming our perception, we reduce the hold of fear and suspicion. So when you encounter these enigmatic birds, see them not as spies or symbols of tracking, but as invitations to observe your own mind, to watch your fears, your assumptions, and your stories, and in doing so, reclaim your freedom. As we bring this conversation to a close, it's crucial to remember that the power we often attribute to external forces, whether witches, animals, or spiritual trackers, is deeply intertwined with the power of our own minds. These animals, rich in symbolism and cultural meaning, serve as mirrors reflecting our fears, our anxieties, and the stories we tell ourselves about control and vulnerability. The black cat, the crow, the raven, and others become more than just creatures. They become symbols that challenge us to confront the unknown within and around us. But true freedom does not come from fearing these symbols or feeling hunted by them. It comes from understanding the psychological and philosophical depths behind these beliefs and reclaiming our mental sovereignty. When we recognize that these animals do not wield power over us independently, but rather through the meanings we assign them, we empower ourselves to reset our minds. We shift from being passive recipients of fear to active architects of our own perception and reality. So take this knowledge as a call to vigilance, not against shadows cast by superstition, but against the unconscious narratives that hold you captive. Examine your fears, question your assumptions, and choose how you respond to the symbols that cross your path. Because the greatest form of protection is not found in avoiding these animals or rituals, but in mastering the landscape of your own mind. In reclaiming your perception, you reclaim your power, and in doing so, you break the cycle of fear and regain true freedom.